Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode joins us from the Yukon. By day, he negotiates treaties with Indigenous peoples at Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada and attempts to make reconciliation real.
By night, he's the author of numerous short stories, and his debut novel, The Black Hunger, is a spine-tingling queer gothic horror which is out right now. We would like to warmly welcome Nicholas Pullen.
Hello, Nick.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Not too bad. It's been a week or two since we bumped into you at
A little bit, yeah, a little bit of time. There's
Yeah.
2 feet of, you said the Yukon, there's 2 feet of snow on the ground up here right now, by the way.
Good
Wow.
Lord.
Just to steer you clear if you ever feel like visiting.
I did have a
I
quick
don't-
look at that area, and I realised that you're quite near Tombstone National Park, which is a ridiculous
Yes.
name for a national park.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're actually, my partner and I are actually planning a hiking trip up there next summer. We're like a backcountry hiking trip, and the mountains it's spectacular, but yeah, the park is closed as of like September 1st because, we choose life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
please
Truly,
do.
that is the stuff horror movies are made of. Oh yeah, my
Oh
partner
god,
and
my
I are going
Spidey senses
Tombstone
have been
Park.
tingling a lot since I moved up here. I'll tell you the Dawson City story at some point, but yeah.
So, speaking of tingling horror, I am led to believe that you're into sunken boats.
I am indeed. Yeah, shipwrecks. I don't know why, but yeah, I've had a fascination with them since I was a kid, and I've dove quite a few of them over years because the Great Lakes are they're fresh. They're fresh water. They're cold. They're dark. So things are preserved in a way they just aren't in the ocean.
Oh, have you got a favourite?
My favorite shipwreck? Yeah, it's called the
Yeah.
Atlantic. It's a steamer that went down about a 20-minute boat ride from where my family cottage was as a kid. And it's a nice, easy wreck. It's a 200-foot like package steamer. It's sort of sitting on a rock with its bow at about 50 feet of water and the stern rising up to about 10. So it's a good relaxing wreck because like if you want to dive and go down to the deep stuff, you can, but it's in pretty shallow water, so like kids can snorkel around the propeller and stuff. There's actually a snowmobile just off the bow of the ship at about 50 feet of water. And some genius years ago put like a mannequin on it dressed in dive gear. just to terrify you as it comes out of the water.
How did you get into diving?
My dad was into it. He had gear, and for some reason I was just obsessed with the idea from the moment I was about 5. And so he would take me down on the buddy breather. Like he would kind of have me under his arm, and I'd be using the extra, like the spare regulator that a dive set has. And we wouldn't go deep or anything, but I think I went for my first proper solo dive when I was like 8 or 9.
Wow.
Somewhere around there.
God, I'd love to do that. I've never even tried.
It's something else. I do it somewhere tropical. The Great Lakes are like an acquired taste, a niche taste. Like the thing about the Great Lakes is like below a certain depth they're meromictic, which means there's no oxygen in the water, so nothing can live, microbial life, nothing. So that means that nothing rots, including bodies.
Right.
There's a shipwreck in Lake Superior that I've never dove called the Kamloops. It's in about 250 feet of water off Ile Royale, which is a technical dive. And the body of one of the crew is floating around the engine room. They call him Whitey. Because what happens to bodies at that depth is something called saponification. Basically, the flesh turns to soap. And if you disturb the water, he floats towards you.
That is incredibly creepy. Has there been no like?
Thanks for listening to this episode. I'm going. That's.
Yeah.
I'm right out. I'm done. Kick him off the air. Yeah.
Is there a reason why he hasn't been recovered and like?
Well, they didn't find the wreck until like 60 years. It's really dangerous to go to that depth, right? Let alone to like extract a body from it, and they don't know who he is.
Right.
So yeah, it's just too dangerous. There's no living family. We don't know who he is, so we don't know who we'd be returning the body to. I mean, I say we, as though this is like my job.
Yeah,
but,
the royal we.
Yeah, the royal we. But we just it's honestly a good question, but I just don't. I think it's dangerous enough to go to that depth, but to like retrieve a body, a 70-year-old body. I mean, would you do it? I wouldn't do
Hell
it.
no! In the space of about 2 minutes, you got me really excited about possibly doing this at some point, and then completely put me off ever doing it. So
No,
that's
well, you just
no, I'm
don't
joking.
be a lunatic and don't dive 250 feet to the bottom of Lake Superior. Go somewhere nice like Australia or the Bahamas. Do
Okay,
like
I'm
a
back. I'm back.
relaxing dive and look at the pretty fish.
I've wanted to go to Canada for years, and this has gone from 2 feet of snow to haunted soap man like really quickly.
I mean, you knew what this was. You knew who you were inviting on. But yeah,
Oh,
I
fantastic.
don't come to the Yukon. I mean, go somewhere. Go to like Toronto or Georgian Bay or Vancouver. Georgian Bay is our best kept secret. Like, it's one of the most spectacularly beautiful parts of the world. It's like just this freshwater ocean with, beautiful pink granite rocks and twisted windswept pines and gorgeous sunny days. Like, yeah, people don't
That
know
sounds
about it, and
beautiful.
we kind of like to keep it that way. You might enjoy that more than the Yukon.
We'll bleep it out. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Now
Uh,
only we know.
so we have some stories to tell. We've all written to the same prompt, which is patrol. And Nico, you're going to read first, I think.
Right, you are. Patrol. I walk. My last order was Mishmar. You would say walk. My master did not speak your tongue. I do not truly know how I come to speak it, but I may make an educated guess. The scroll in my mouth must say Lechavin. This means to comprehend, and so I must. It does not, I think, ask me to be a great mind. Though given time enough, any being will start to contemplate its situation. This must, when all is said and done, fall within the bounds of comprehension. Understanding of the universe in which you are placed is the task of all things that live in some way. And so I, given time beyond the temporary meet of the other wanderers of the sphere, have had ample opportunity to expand my comprehension. Yet I cannot comprehend the nature of my order in any other way than it was given. I was young then, to use a term not often employed for my kind. We cannot grow, and are whatever size our master makes us. I suppose a master could add more material, should the situation call for it. But I have never seen this, even with all my years. I was explaining. I was as large as I am now, with arms and legs, such as that of my master, made from pressed mud and incantations. He fed me my only meal, a scroll of words. It has sustained me thus far, and ever will, for on it he did not write Lamut, and so I cannot die, even if I wish to. It told me to lirho ot, so I must see, even when my endless march takes me through the trench, that darkest of places, filled with creatures so unusual that should you see them, I would appear mundane. I do not like it there, but obedience is written into me. So I patrol its darkest depths. The scuttling monstrosities in there as clear to me as though they basked in the sun. I have seen great chitinous beasts, so heavy with age that they cannot shift their ancient bulk. They lurk, claws large as the tallest of your kind, and wait for the unlucky. It makes me wonder how it would be if, like those gargants, my mass overcame my power to ambulate. Would I drag myself by my arms until they too broke from the effort? Would I propel myself ever forth, because this was my order? The cycle of my endless march is tiresome. Whatever moods I was given, I have learned ennui. I walk along the seabed, soaking in tang and salt. I cannot feel pain, but I feel the sense of sluggishness. I know I am weakened by it. Then over land I walk, parched by sun and baked until once again I feel right. Then, too far, where I feel that I should crumble and leave my duty derelict. Then water, then earth, then water, then sand, on, ever on and on. I do not think that there are many now who could stop me. The craft of my kind is long forgotten, even to other worshippers of the scroll of men. I have never met another of my kind either, though my path has crossed all places that are and were since my order was given. I have crossed humans, but am wise enough to avoid dense populations. The order was given to defend us with my patrol from oncoming danger. Attracting a tide of curious lives would serve against my order. This I understand, and thus I follow. There is no thought to where my feet go. I simply place them one before the other and walk as the path my orders guide me determines. A great many changes have overcome the land and sea as I have walked. There are fewer and fewer places where I may walk unhindered. Not that any hindrance would halt me in my endless march. As I crest the sea, often I am bedraggled in filth, muck from human waste, refuse and excreta. It is a sadness to me to watch this failure. The art of Golem has passed long ago, but now it seems that so many of the arts of humanity are destroyed. They take not love from hillock or stars or glory from the sea. Instead, they bicker and ravage, destroying all that was given to them, ignoring the teachings of their scroll. How I wish I could do the same. I comprehend this as it is my words, but I cannot act upon it, for disobedience is not among them. How I wish I had swallowed Bechera. Taste of choice might solve the sadness I feel gnawing at me. Understanding is painful when it cannot be shared. I will walk ever until the humans have destroyed themselves. I will witness the depths and the heights of this place until the final heat comes and bakes me dry as bone. This I comprehend. Until then, I will patrol. Mishmar, he said, and walk I shall.
What a voice! What a voice! That was
Yeah, you've set a voice acting standard that I will simply not be able to meet. Just to warn you, like,
Now, Nick, I have exactly one trick.
that is not true.
yeah, that was some Orson Welles shit right there. Love that.
I'm writing that one down.
Yeah. On the bank. Some wonderful lines. That being made of pressed mud and incantations really tickled me. That really almost gave me goosebumps. That I really enjoyed that description. And then towards the end, understanding is painful when it cannot be shared. Was I found quite emotive. It really got to be that one. I think. I mean, the whole thing is sort of it's not framed in a woe is me way, is it? But it is sort of extremely critical of humans that made him and what they're doing to the planet. So I think I'm very much on Team Golem here.
Yeah, it's more of a tale of pity, isn't it? I think there's something so fantastic about the sort of golem mythos and the
There is,
idea
yeah.
of if you said to them cut down trees, they'd cut every tree on the planet unless you told them to stop.
Yeah.
And
It
the
really
idea
made
that
me. I mean, it really made me think of China Mieville, right? Iron Council.
Mm.
Like the prose was as lush as lyrical as his. Like it was very
good grief.
beautifully realized. Like I really enjoy it. Yeah, I mean a golem story from the golem's POV. The idea of the scroll, like acting out the scroll, acting out a programming that's impossible to overcome, a destiny that's not your own. Yeah, I the image of him just trudging through the vasty deep.
Mm.
I I was blown away. I wasn't expecting that.
I wish we'd had our on mic meeting before I'd written it because I would have put in a soapy dead
I
guy,
know.
but I didn't know they.
There's always really odd connections whenever we record, and that's probably the strangest one I think because
That is,
it came from like a completely unscripted just chatter before the stories, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden we're in the Mariana Trench with a golem.
yeah, we're in the trench stalking past creatures of the
Yeah,
abyss. Yeah,
absolutely.
I actually, I mean, I adore it. Obviously, you have my attention, right? Anything watery has my. If I suppose the only thing I would say, there's two things I would say. One is that this seems like more of an exercise in world building than an actual story, which is absolutely not a criticism. Like world building is much more fun, and like there are whole books built out of that.
Mm.
But it's more of a it's like a snapshot of a world of an idea that it is a story where there's like something happening. Like in the
Yeah.
sense, it's like a beautiful oil painting, but it's not a
Yeah.
movie. You're not like there's no action. There's just this finely realized, gorgeously crafted image.
I think I'd agree with that. Like, I think
Yeah.
just to add to that, I don't know whether you would agree with this Nick, but the character themselves being set up immediately as being completely immutable. Their programming is set. That means that the main character, it isn't possible for them to have any growth, and which is the sort of
Yeah,
traditional way of telling a story, isn't it? So the world
Mm.
has to do the storytelling for the golem.
yeah, and I think in a short story that is actually fine. I mean, obviously, I would buy a longer book based on this premise, right?
Mm.
Where there could be a story, but for a short, I mean, I really struggle with short stories just because you have to be so economical and um, spare and laconic with your story. You have to sort of craft it to fit into an enclosed space. And oh, babe, I'm in the middle of the podcast. Sorry, that's okay. Sorry,
Okay.
might have to edit that in post. Um, was this? Yeah, like a short story. It's difficult to cram a story in there because you're just realizing this finely painted miniature. But I think, and the other thing, and I wanted to ask you, Nico, if this is deliberate because it's never made explicit what he's actually doing and what his purpose is. Like he's on this endless cycle, and maybe that's part of it, the futility of it, the total ignorance of his purpose, the following of some inscrutable plan that he doesn't understand. But was that deliberate? Because it's never made clear why he's patrolling or why he's on this endless death march through time.
My concept was that he was at some point this ancient rabbi or whoever's made him has said,
Yeah.
just walk the perimeter, and when whatever he was guarding was gone, that perimeter became larger and larger until it was everything.
Oh, I see. Okay, maybe I'm just dense. I might have just missed that, but that's.
I know it's a very good chance that I didn't get that in there clearly. I mean, it's
So
an
he
interesting
he,
thing
he is
because
himself detritus. He is himself a cast off, a forgotten. Like he's just doomed to because his purpose has actually been served, but he doesn't.
yeah,
There's nothing he can do to. Oh wow,
Yeah, I think that's
that's
probably
even better.
where you would get the character growth. You know, when I was saying earlier about the world needs to do the growing rather than him,
yeah,
or not necessarily growing but changing. Like, you know, a character has to be changed by the end, don't they? The world has changed by the end of this story, so maybe making it obvious how that's impacted him would take it up a notch
Yeah,
because it is great. But I think I do agree with Nick. Um,
I mean, I'm
I
assuming you guys. Oh, sorry, Ben.
I was just going to say, I really liked the POV that you constructed, and then in the latter third, you aimed that at how humans ignore the teachings of their scroll, and their
Yeah, I
scroll
love
in
that.
this being like religious dogma and law, or just like the rule of law or
yeah.
whatever it is. That was really cool because
That's
it
one of the
is,
oldest themes there is, right?
yeah,
Disobedience to God, disobedience to the order. Yeah,
100%, yeah, really like some really deep resonating themes in this very well constructed and very well performed story.
agreed. Very, very profound. I quite enjoyed it. I would definitely I would be fascinated to read a longer like an extrapolation of this, like to build on
Yeah.
this. The world that's created is incredibly lush.
It's I think that would be cool. It's a very short one. It's 855 words, so right at the short
Lower
end of
end.
what we can do. So
Yeah.
I might even have a play around with it and push it up towards that 1500 that we can write to and see where it could have been in here, and then send it just to you two, and the people listening never get to see it. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
Well, until it gets published somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, great stuff. Well done, Nick.
Oh,
It's
fair,
time for
really.
the sorry. Well done,
Yeah, thanks,
Nico.
man.
It's time
Yeah.
Well
for
done, Nico.
Nick's
I was gonna
story.
say. Yeah. The Old Crow Incident. A voice recording found at the site of the Old Crow Incident, February 16th, 2026. It wasn't a Chinese spy balloon. I seen it. It was something else. From somewhere else. Something and somewhere not right. The colonel didn't believe me, and now the colonel's dead. My name's Charlie Frost. I'm Vuntut Gwitchin. I live in Old Crow on Gwitchin land, way up north. The land of the lakes, we call it. It's ours. Always has been, always will be. We got a treaty that says so. Now that you can trust what the Canadians say. I'm a ranger. 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group, Old Crow Patrol. It's a reconnaissance unit. Not much, really. Canada likes to pretend it owns the land up here, so it needs a military presence. Mostly it's a make-work thing for us Indians. We do some scouting while we're out on the land on our snow machines and with our dogs. Don't think we'd be much use in a real fight. Don't really care. We get a Lee Enfield rifle, 200 rounds, and 12 days pay a year. Helps with the hunt. Mostly they want to use what we know about the land that they don't. If we spot something unusual, we're supposed to let them know. Colonel Grayfield's the one we're supposed to call. He's all right for a white man. 5 days ago, about 3 in the morning, we spotted something unusual. I was out on the land with my buddy Darren. Just us, no brats around, no women. We weren't drinking. Haven't had a drink in 5 years. Darren not for 7. Christ, it was cold. We'd filled the stove in the hot tent when the light outside went green. We went outside. We thought it was just the Yikai, the northern lights. It's February after all. Nothing unusual about green lights in the sky this time of year. Nothing strange. But this got strange real quick. It didn't stop, for one thing. The yikai usually flares out fast, beautiful while it lasts, but it doesn't last long. This lasted. This got stronger, brighter. After a few minutes, it was as bright as day. I thought maybe it was a flashback. I dropped some acid years ago when I was down in Vancouver having a bad time, but Darren could see it too. As the light got brighter, it got noisier. Again, not unusual. You can hear the yikai if you're lucky. It's a whistling, a cracking, a hissing, like static on a radio. That's what this sounded like at first, but then it sounded like a voice. A deep voice, howling. Like a wolf, but deeper, louder, angrier. We couldn't move, frozen like deer. We looked at each other and we didn't know what to do. We looked up and we saw something was falling out of the sky. It was big, shaped a bit like a teardrop. It was glowing deep green and it was falling fast. It left a trail of black through the sky like it was ripping a hole in it. It disappeared behind a mountain and we felt the ground shake. The light went out. It was dark again. The stars came back, only now there was a column of blue light rising into the sky away beyond the mountain. We jumped on our sleds and gunned it. We were back in Old Crow in 40 minutes, and thank God, too, because we'd left the spare gas by the fire back at the camp. One of us had better call the colonel, said Darren after we'd gotten our shit together. And say what? I asked. I don't know. We saw something weird. Maybe. I don't know. We're supposed to, for sure, I said. I'm not going back out there without him, and not without a bigger gun than a Lee Enfield. He was right. Darren was a real Indian, a good man. He'd helped me out 5 years ago. I owed him my life. We got the colonel on the phone that night. He was pretty grumpy. We'd woken him up at 4. I don't blame him. What the fuck is it, Frost? I don't know, Colonel, but it was big and it hit the ground hard. Did you get close to it? Fuck no. Then go check it out tomorrow and report back. Colonel, you're going to want to see this. The sky is blue above it, glowing, and the noise. There was silence down the phone a long time. All right, I'm on my way. Stand down until I get to Old Crow. I'll be there at 0900. Colonel? What? You better bring some real guns. Another long pause. I'll be there at 0900, Frost. Our guns will be fine. Stupid man. We met him at the landing strip, just us. We didn't tell the chief or anyone else. Didn't want to spread a panic. The sun wasn't anywhere near up. Wouldn't be rising till spring. There was a storm. We weren't sure the plane would be able to land in the blizzard in the dark, but it did. Could barely hear the engine over the wind. But in the distance we could see the faint blue glow in the sky where the thing had fallen. We showed the colonel. If it's a spy balloon, this one's radioactive, said the colonel. He looked worried. Not scared, just worried. How do you know? Cherenko effect, he said. That's radiation ionizing the air. He swore. He thought a minute. I'll let Ottawa know when I know for sure. Come on, we're heading out. We hopped back on the sleds. It took us about an hour to get back to our camp. The fire was out and the snow had buried everything. Darren and I can see pretty good in the dark. The colonel had brought his goggles. He didn't need to ask where it was. We could see the column pretty clear, even through the snow, and we could hear the noise now. A high, cold noise, like singing, but not any kind of singing you'd want to hear. We climbed the mountain on our sleds, engines roaring. All around us the tundra was white as death. The light got stronger. We crested our pass and got our first clear look at the thing. It had blown a crater in the mountainside, and the ground was black like a campfire ring. The snow wasn't covering it, wasn't even landing. We could feel heat from it even from where we were, about 200 yards away. And in the middle of the crater was the thing, like a teardrop, but twisted, warped, and twice the size of the church back in Old Crow. It was pulsing black and green. It wasn't light. It was an unlight, an absence of light, like it was sucking in light and spitting it back out in a shape strange. God in heaven, said the colonel. But it was hard to hear him over the wind. He might have said something else. There was a skittering, a chittering, like angry squirrels. We wheeled around, trying to hear where it was coming from, rifles raised. There was something out there. We couldn't see it, but we could feel it watching us. I couldn't keep my hands from shaking, and it wasn't the cold, even though it was 40 below, easy. Suddenly I heard Darren's gun going to my left. He unloaded 5 rounds. There was a screeching. I still couldn't see nothing. I heard the colonel shout, "Kill it! Fucking kill it, Darren!" I still couldn't see it. I heard a squelch, a wet sucking sound, and my face got sprayed good with something hot and wet. I wheeled around. It was Darren's blood. I seen Darren. He was down on the ground, and the thing had its head buried in him deep like a tick. 15 tentacles waving around in the air like an octopus, but worse. Deep green unlight in a single horrible eye. Run! Screamed the colonel, and I fucking ran. I ran fast enough to outrun the colonel, which in the end was all I needed to do. I heard it when the thing connected with the colonel behind me. Heard him scream. Then I heard the scream cut out. I could hear the screeching behind me, but I kept running all the way back to the sleds. But it followed me. When I got off the sled, I seen it behind me. I seen 3 of them. I'm back in Old Crow now. I'm hiding. I hurt my lungs real bad. You're not supposed to run that fast in 40 below. I froze them good. If you're hearing this, it means you found my phone. It means you made it up here. I warned people, but not in time. And the thing followed the tracks of my sled all the way back to Old Crow. We're in trouble. I don't know who else is alive. Won't be many. It wasn't a Chinese spy balloon. It was something else. And you'd better figure out what it was right quick. Because it's breeding.
Hot damn, Nick, that was great. I really enjoyed that a huge amount. Thank you for telling
Thanks,
me
man.
that story.
I've got to say, like, what a closing line.
Yeah.
Like, because it's breeding.
Yeah.
No, no, thank you.
No. Unsubscribe.
Oh, great! I could listen to your prose all day, man. That is
Thank you, man.
that is really, really good stuff. Like at one point, I wrote down that there's just a great economy of description. Like the feelings are created extremely quickly, but without feeling rushed. And
Thanks. Yeah.
I started to equate that to sort of like Hemingway-esque, but I think you've got more character in your like sentences than he does.
Appreciate that.
They,
I was going for sorry, go on.
oh no, please.
I was with this one. I wanted to have the character be really laconic, right? Like really short sentences. Like this is like a northern guy. He's not windy. He's not one for long speeches or sentences. And like it was a fun exercise because a lot of my prose can sometimes be a bit flowery. So it was fun. I wanted to do something kind of stripped down and
Absolutely. Well,
I
can tell you now that you've absolutely nailed that, and I would definitely read more in that style.
Thank you.
That's very, very good. You're talking about being laconic, but that kind of almost it began. I wrote down conversational, but that's sort of not quite right. It's a report storytelling, really, isn't it? But
Yeah.
You really you were talking about Nico's performance, his voice being sort of George Orwell sort of stuff. Sorry,
Orson Welles. Yeah.
Orson Welles. I thought you actually really lent into what you can do with your voice, which was you got that military stiffness in the delivery, which worked really well, and you were also throwing away the lines because it was about the gear, about the equipment, about the caliber of the rifles, and it was just it was really, really good. I enjoyed that a lot.
Thanks, man.
There were like some really cool bits of characterization that were sort of thrown in as asides, but were really you could tell they meant something. That was a bit that really caught me was when he made a point of saying like I was sober, he was sober, because there is that when you're talking about indigenous peoples, there are these tendencies to especially in North America, to assume that they are, they're drunks or that they're on all kinds of mind-bending cactus juices and.
Was that what that was?
It's a stereotypical trope, for sure, and I wanted to kind of subvert it.
I think I read that as men out in the wild will have a nip every now and again. I think that's
yeah. Well, it's it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think it does a disservice. Like alcoholism is obviously a huge problem in indigenous communities, and it's not like we can't pretend that's not true, but real healing is underway, and sobriety is part of that. And it's the legacy of trauma, right? It's a legacy of the harms that were inflicted by colonialism and by residential schools, and so I don't know. I just these characters were just sober, right? Like these are leaders. These are guys who are a big deal in their community, and they're not they're to be trusted,
just on that sort of sobriety being something he sort of trusted in leadership, I did chuckle at the line about how he did drop some acid years ago, and he was thinking it might be a flashback.
Yeah.
That got me a bit. So it's sort of like he's had a bit of a rockier past for a man of his caliber than others.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we all have a past, right?
Hell yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I would. Sorry, go on.
Some of us are still in it. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. um,
That I think that indigenous perspective reads in some lines in a really interesting way as well. Like when you said that the sun wasn't near up, it wouldn't rise till spring. Like because as someone who's used to the sun coming up every day, that makes you go,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I don't know how long that is. I don't know how long that's going to be. And they're going to be how long are they going to be in the dark?" Like full panic, and it's something that's so normal to the character that it caught me.
Yeah.
Caught me really off guard.
I'm glad, man. Yeah, I wanted to do something. I mean, I wanted to do something up here, right? I wanted to use, and like the Canadian Rangers are a real thing, and they are like they're like a part of life up here in a lot of communities. And but one of the problems I run into as like a white Canadian writer is that like it's to write Indigenous stories is kind of off limits for me, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Like for that reason, I'm not sure I will necessarily do anything with this story, but like it's just like there's a legacy of exploitation there, and I have to be aware of it. And I actually have a novel set in the Yukon that I have well I wrote it was originally part of the Black Hunger, but my agents made it clear that like as a white guy in 2021 I simply couldn't use indigenous culture, right? And they had a point.
Yeah.
Like they were right. Like it's so I rewrote the novel, but I still have this Yukon story that I want to use. But what I'm going to do is work with an indigenous elder, or like an indigenous writer, to like collaborate and
oh, that's a nice idea.
split.
Mm.
Yeah, like it's a way to kind of like because I do think it's a story worth telling, and I have no problem sharing the credit or the money. Like as long as it gets out there, right?
So we have a question in the next episode, which I think you are going to really get on with based on what you just said. So I'll sort of hold my extra questions on that bit for then, I think. But I just wanted to ask you a question actually, because this is actually something that I occasionally catch myself doing and potentially try and iron out of my writing. So because that was so impressive and it worked for you. I'm interested to hear your take on this. I'm aware I've bigged this up. It's about something really, really small, so don't worry about it. It was you said you were describing the noises when the creature appears, and you said
Yeah.
a skittering, a chittering, and it's like a re-clarifying of the noise. And when I do that, I feel like, oh no, people will think I just don't know what it sounds like. But obviously, it did work in this story. So I was wondering what your take on that kind of like double description is.
That's interesting. I mean, I thought of it as kind of an emphasizing, a clarifying, an enhancing. Like it's there's a rhythm to words, right? And they
Yeah.
sort of build on each other like music. And I mean, yeah, I'm not too. I don't mind that when I see it. I mean, obviously, I wrote this really fast, so like if I given it a harder edit, maybe I would have. But no, that particular thing I don't mind. It's I think if it's done well, it can be rhetorically very effective. When it's done badly, it can be dangerous. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really situational, right? I mean, it's like any art form. It's like sometimes you can break the rules sometimes, but you have to know the rules really really well to break them successfully.
That idea of it being like an element of rhetoric, so therefore you have to get it right, otherwise it's going to clang. I think is
Yeah, exactly. Especially because this is an oral, like this. What we're doing here is I love because it's an oral medium, right? And that's one of the reasons I thought it'd be fun to do like an indigenous story that's basically a transcription of a recording, right? It's like it's being related orally. It's not because text written down and text spoken are two very very different kinds of music with their own rhythm and their own rules.
Absolutely. I just want to go into a couple of the other lines which I thought were absolutely fantastic because they, to the point where I had to write them down. So it was sounded like a wolf, but deeper, louder, angrier. Really enjoyed that. Again, it's got good rhetoric and bounce to it. The snow wasn't covering it, wasn't even landing. Like you threw that line away, and it was just wonderfully thrown away. That was an excellent line.
Cheers, man.
Because that's deeply unsettling, quite literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the singing, but not any kind of singing you'd want to hear. Again, brilliant. And the last two, I'm aware I'm just rereading out your story at this point, but the last two were run, and I fucking ran. uh, and right at the end, you're not supposed to run that fast at 40 below. That adding in that really knowledgeable bit of description about how someone has fucked up their internal organs doing something too hard, right at
Yeah.
the end of your story, it was like a gut punch. It was like, okay, so he's dead for multiple reasons.
Yeah, he's in real trouble, and that
Yeah.
that is something that happens. Like that's a real thing, right? That's
Right.
that happens. You can literally freeze your lungs.
God.
Oh damn.
Do you guys have any notes though? I mean, come on, beat me up here. Like what?
I was going to say that
can't, like-
what I have one, but it's only because like it made me really amused in the moment. The line "like an octopus, but worse," because it implies that there's something inherently bad about octopi.
I mean,
And I
they're
felt
pretty
kind of bad for
anti octopus rhetoric. I mean, come on, they're Lovecraftian creatures of the abyss. Like you wouldn't. They freak me. They freak me out a little. I love them, but they do freak me out. Sorry.
I think I did write down 15 tentacles as well, because I thought that is an odd number of tentacles to
Literally.
be aware of in the moment, in a very like
That's true. Like he's counting. Like he's
Yeah.
counting.
yeah, like it
Yeah.
would take time to count to 15 in that moment, which he didn't necessarily have.
That's a really good point.
So it becomes a it becomes hyperbole, doesn't it? Basically,
It does.
And
Yeah.
he's not very hyperbolic in other places. He's very laconic. So yeah, potentially
That's a really good point.
That I think those were that and the clarification about the double description were my only non entirely positive notes. That was
Appreciate
really
it though.
good. Really good. So before we move on to the next story, I think it would be good to just let people know where they can find you and what they can read of yours. I think.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, you can find me on all social media except TikTok. I'm at the Naj Pullen on Twitter. I think I'm NAJ Pullen on Instagram. Always happy to chat. I have a website, nicholaspullen.com, that at some point I have to do something with. But you can find my first novel, The Black Hunger, pretty much anywhere books are sold in the English-speaking world at this point. I know it's on the bestseller table at Indigo in Canada. You can go to the Hachette website, Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Blackwell's. That was really it for me. I just wanted to see my book on the shelf at Blackwell's in Oxford on Broad Street. Everything else is commentary.
Hell
But yeah, it's just Google The Black Hunger Nicholas Pullen and you'll find it. Like you can Google me now. It's really weird, but you can actually Google me.
Right. There's no putting it off now, Ben, I'm afraid. It's time for story number 3.
Yeah, victim number 3. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, there we go. Patrol. The metal men have always been there, their clockwork hearts perpetually marching them in circles around the edges of our fields. When the corn is tall and ripening, the only sign of them is the tips of their spears and faded plumes of their helmets bobbing beyond the husks. In the rainy season, when all the leaves in the forest curl into burnished claws, their inexorable slog carves a deep-rutted halo in the mud around us. During the winter, they are a shadowy smudge tramping through the cold fog of early morning. The sound of their metal boots on the stones of the 2 bridges their path crosses help us to count down the hours until spring comes again. There is often an inquisitive child in each generation who, either through curiosity or in an attempt to show daring, would risk going towards the forest. I was one such child. I still remember the speed with which one of the metal men detached from the patrol and caught up to me. His etched eyes stared without emotion when he caught my wrist, and firmly ushered me back within the safety of the village. That was back when there were still many of them, whereas now we must reinforce their guardianship by teaching our children not to go beyond the patrol's waning protection. It grew so frequent for them to fail that even the most simple-minded of our village could tell when one of the metal men was about to stop. His movements would become jerking and ponderous, the gap between him and the rest of the patrol widening. In their stoic fashion, his brothers would continue at their steady pace until he lagged so far behind that they began to lap him. When I was a child, 40 of the 100 yet patrolled our border. Now, most of them are immobilized and frozen in the spot where their clockwork finally halted them. 5 remained to us, and as I aged, and sadly began to know loss myself, I often wondered whether they mourned their statue-like brothers when they marched past them. Such is certainly true for us, as, before our records began, none of us have ever left the safety of our patrolled border. Each day we walk to our places of work and must pass the graveyard at the heart of our village. Many generations of all of the families given safe haven by the automatons are buried there, and we, the living, are vastly outnumbered by our dead. The decision was made when I was a young man that we must know more of the world, for the time would come when the last of the metal men would take his final step. I have always enjoyed pouring my thoughts out as written words, but the craft assigned to me was to become a carpenter. We had great need of joinery and construction, as it had been decided that we would build a tower within our village so that we might see out over the forest and spy what dangers lurked beyond. Fearing to step beyond the patrol's boundary to hew fresh lumber from the forest, we instead tore down old houses and recovered as much building material as we could spare from our village. The metal men did not take notice of us, but as the tower grew, I found it fascinating to watch them. I marvelled at how their precise, implacable patrol must hold back whatever evil lurked in the forest, despite their reduced numbers. The tower was solid, but so tall that strong winds caused it to flex. Many of the other carpenters found that they became unsteady the higher they climbed, some refusing to ever ascend again. For myself, I found that I could breathe that rarer air more easily. It became increasingly obvious to me that the forest was truly enormous, as it filled my vision at the end of every day, so I insisted we build it taller still. During last spring, I was eventually given leave to pull down the granary. The timbers of that old building were broad and long. Absorbing them into my construction greatly increased our vantage point. Only then could I finally see it, an end to the forest. It appeared to surround us for great distances in all directions, aside from the north, where it abruptly ended. There it gave way to rolling downs, through which trickled rills that caught the sun and sparkled in my eyes. I could also see a patchwork of hedgerow-partitioned fields woven together by the shadows of distant paths. No one knew what to make of what I told them, even after others dared the climb to see it for themselves. There appeared to be no great evil beyond our knowing, and no end to the horizon in sight. Our world was immeasurably larger than we could have ever guessed. Excitement none of us had felt before filled our hearts and brought smiles to every face. The first group who tried to leave were caught by what remained of the patrol. The explorers tried to speak to them, to convince them that we must know what was in the land beyond. The 5 remaining automatons would not be swayed. When our people refused to return to the village, the metal men lowered their spears. I remember someone in the crowd of onlookers, quicker than the rest, screamed when they realized what was about to happen. The mighty automatons drove their spears through every last one of those explorers, each one neatly skewered through the heart, so that their heads lolled instantly. Those that ran did not get far before they met the same fate. The metal men dragged the corpses by their hair to the village graveyard before resuming their inexorable patrol. In shock, we buried our dead. It was decided that we would disassemble the tower, rebuild the granary, and wait. I felt as though I were in a daze as I undid my life's work. Whilst I did so, others toiled to ensure we would have supplies for future explorations, and all cursed the metal man. It was not until autumn that the necks of the automatons began to grow ponderous. That news was cheered throughout the village. Another 3 swiftly followed during winter, and come the next spring, the last of them finally slowed. We feasted and smiled to see his footsteps relent. I was the first to approach him the day he stopped. He looked the same as he had done when he returned my younger self to the prison of our village. I stepped closer and flinched when his etched eyes swiveled to watch me. My breath caught, but he could no longer move to seize me. I took the spear from his hand and led the villagers in readying for our departure. For what crime were generations of us condemned? I do not know, but I intend to find out.
That was
Oh,
wicked.
holy shit! Oh my god! Wow. I'm
The,
sorry.
uh,
I'll need a
like to hear-
minute to recover from that.
the the idea of the etched eyes staring was one of the first things that like really shook me in that. The
Yeah,
just the like the orbs turning to look at you, but there's no life in them. There's something so good about that as an unsettling image.
yeah. I can see them in my mind's eye moving quickly, like a snake's eyes, just like darting. Like
Yeah.
but totally frozen, totally immobile. You had my attention immediately. Steampunk, folk horror, fantasy, like perfection.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some really interesting world building in there. Like when he said that
Oh, yeah.
the craft assigned to me, like these people aren't making choices; they're being given jobs at some age.
Mm.
And the idea, he is a carpenter in a world surrounded by forests, and they're pulling down their granary for wood. That's such a defeated people for that guy to
Yeah.
then be ready to keep climbing at the cost of everything else they had. Like, what a cool character and a cool story, man.
Thank you.
Oh my god, yeah. Like a scribe forced to labor, always a tragic fate. It had like an autumnal end of days quality that I really loved. Like this sense of an ending. Like it was. It made me think. It's obviously not at all the same thing, but I got a bit of a whiff of the cricketers from A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But these are people that are intergenerationally imprisoned,
Yeah.
like an inscrutable collective punishment. It was brilliant because I spent so much of the story wondering what the terror was in the woods beyond. But then the twist, they're not protected; they're prisoners. That was spectacular. The gut punch of that.
Thank you.
The idea that the horror is not out there. And how relevant to the moment too. The people who are supposed to be protecting us are actually our jailers. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
a
I think
theme
that was
resonates right now.
there was some weight behind that one. I won't lie.
No,
Yeah.
I saw what you were going for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think.
got
I'm sorry,
Oh
Nick,
no,
go on.
please.
I was just going to say that there were other ways that I was going to take this, and like I was going to put in some stuff about like how difficult it is to learn a craft when you are so limited on materials and things like that.
Yeah.
But I felt like it wasn't really serving the the pared down story structure, and also it had a different ending originally, which was that they do leave. It's all the same, but they do leave, and they go and they find that the world has been essentially like destroyed by a plague. So they've sort of been saved by being imprisoned.
Oh, I see.
Which the only reason I bring it up is because you said that sort of autumnal end of days vibe.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's because it originally I think I was writing it with a different kind of ending in mind, so that might be where that came
I
from.
think that would have. I mean, I don't think that would have been a bad thing to add. I think I liked that it was left open ended. What I really loved was I adored the way that you're not describing the horror that lurks beyond the patrol, like what's created this world, because so much of horror lies in what isn't said, right? What isn't known. That's where the imagination can really get to work, and that's where you can really generate real fear, the fear of what's beyond, the flickering light of the campfire, right?
Yeah, great
Like
point.
that primal quality. So I think you did you did an incredible job with that. My only very small note is that he can see the downs really well if he's that far away.
Yeah, I know. I
Not
think
that it matters, but yeah.
I get your points. I
You
think
can see it
I
well
potentially got a
enough.
bit carried away. I've been reading quite a lot of Tolkien recently, so I think
It
maybe
had
I got a bit.
Tolkien energy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that description maybe
As soon as you
JRR.
said downs, I thought of Tolkien, right? Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
I got kind of you know the M Night Shyamalan movie, The Village.
Oh, I
I've
never
not
saw that. I
seen
know
Remember
what you're
that?
talking about.
Remember that movie?
I've not seen it.
When he was up at the top looking out, I got a real sense that he was looking on sort of modernity, and
Oh,
the whole plot of that movie is that they think they're in kind of a sort of Middle Ages village surrounded by evil monsters, but actually they're just on a compound somewhere, and it's the people in charge of it don't want them to see the modern world.
that's a
They're living
cool
in.
idea. I guess that's one of the
That's a great
benefits by
idea.
leaving it open. I guess that it could,
Yeah.
that your mind is allowed to go there.
But yeah, it was when you were talking about
Yeah,
the sort of the hedges and the paths. My brain went, "Oh, it's just like modern countryside. Is that what they're
Mm.
seeing?" And yeah, it sent me on a journey. So it's really cool that both of us got completely different endings in our brains out of what you've done. It means you did a bloody good job.
Thank you.
yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because like you want to leave things open. Like there's merit to leaving things open ended, and like just one, in a short story, just one line, or just one sentence can completely change like what it is you're accomplishing. Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I ran into the same problem with a short story of mine called Helluland Saga that used to be published, but the journal that was carrying it folded, and
Oh
there
dear.
was like right at the end there was, I still like it, I might resubmit it somewhere, but right at the end there was one line that like that if I included it or I didn't include it would completely change the story, and I ended up not including it. But it's one of the interesting aspects of a short work is like how when you're playing with such limited space and such small materials, just like one brushstroke can completely change the painting.
Mm. Yes. No, I think we've encountered those a few times in over the years of doing this podcast of just something spinning on a dime, like even down to like the last word, or even the last
Yeah.
inflection of the way that you say that word as well. It can color the whole thing. So you have
Yeah,
got to be quite
question mark
careful, I
can
think.
change a story.
Yeah, question mark can change the
Mm.
story. Yeah, for sure. Oh well, that's lovely. Nico, have you got any notes, other changes that you'd go for?
I don't think I have.
Oh, well, lovely. Well, I think those were. I mean, both of yours were excellent. So I'm glad that I could try and get on par at the end. But that
Oh
was
no, yeah, you guys have some game. I'm blown away. Those were incredible.
well. It's been a while since we've had a guest, so it was truly delightful to hear your story, and I think that's one that's going to really stick in my mind. So I hope you do something else with it after this as well.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Same to you, actually. Look forward to seeing that out there. Both
Thank
of you.
you. So we'll draw
Legend.
this episode to a close, but join us in the next episode for the interview where we'll go through with Nick Pullen our new set of questions for season 9. See you then. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?